Tonight's meditation class this is what's been happening for me. I don't know if this is what's been happening for you guys, but the days and the weeks just kind of bleed together. And I was sitting at home last night thinking, I wonder what I'm going to talk about for meditation next time, whenever that is. And I realized, wait a minute, it's tomorrow. It seemed like just yesterday that I gave the last meditation talk. This is Thursday, right? Life is so bizarre. This is actually part of what I wrote about in the blog this month, The Lost Year, where it's like so few actual events happen in our lives now because we're just stuck at home. I mean, I get out more than I think almost anybody else does. I come to the dojo and I teach here on Zoom. I'm over at the park and I'm teaching there, but still, it's like fewer things are happening, and that's like how our understanding of time, that's how we kind of conceive of it, is by these events and these things that happen. It's like first this thing happened, then the next thing happened, then that thing happened. Well, none of those things are happening because we're all just stuck. So this is going to be like that time in our lives where we vaguely remember coronavirus, we vaguely remember the quarantine times where we're just stuck at home, but it's almost going to be like that year just like rushed by. And I hope that it's not an entire year, but we're on 9 months of coronavirus now, 6 months of quarantine, and the way that this works for me is, I'm sitting there last night and I realized, well, I got to give this talk tomorrow. What am I going to talk about? And so the thing that I end up talking about in some way, shape, or form usually is something related to focus, our ability to concentrate, our ability to control and have power over our thoughts and our emotions and all of that. So the word focus came into my mind, and I was thinking about, I say yelling at, it's yelling with the kids in kids class. I'm always encouraging them loudly to focus. And I thought about it, like, this thought, I swear to you, occurred to me for what I believe was the first time in my entire life last night. The question, what is focus? I mean, I know what the experience of being focused feels like. When you are able to keep your mind on something, not be distracted, you're meditating and you keep bringing your mind back to it. But, like, what is the actual mechanism that leads to focus? And I was wondering last night, in the way that it goes with meditation, for example, we're constantly bringing our mind back. And the first thought that I had is what we call focus, is that kind of like a trained thought, like a habitual thought that sounds like you asking yourself, are you paying attention? Are you in the moment right now? And I thought, maybe that's focus, I don't know. But let's figure it out. So I Googled, what is focus? And then I found the first decent article, which I'm going to read a little bit of to you guys tonight. And if you know all this and you're already like a neurologist or something, I apologize, but this is from an article by Dr. Julie Schwartzbard, MD. So she talks about how there are 3 different kinds of focus, or 3 different kinds of ways that your mind is focusing. The first one is selective attention. So this is focusing on one thing while disregarding other things. And this is, I think, a big part of, at least, what I usually refer to as focus and think of focus being. I'm able to stay focused on this thing while ignoring the others. The next one is divided attention. So this is what most other people think of as focus, or like the regular way of living, which is my brain is constantly kind of switching back and forth between things. This is what the rest of the world calls multitasking. And people think of it like, I can do 2 things at once, I can do 3 things at once, And the reality is you cannot. What you can do is divided attention, where you're first focusing on this thing, but then you can switch over to this other thing, and you can do that very rapidly. But you're never actually you never actually have two things simultaneously at the forefront of your consciousness. Now you might have things going on in the back. So she uses the example of driving, where it's like I'm driving where I have to be aware of what's going on around me, and I have to be aware of what my body is doing. And that's what we do in martial arts, of course. When you're sparring, you're not just thinking about the one thing. You're thinking about your partner's punch, but then they're going to kick you, right? So you're kind of aware of multiple things, but your conscious mind, what you are really focusing on at one point, if you're trying to do some kind of work, you cannot be simultaneously writing an email with all of your attention on this where you are at the exact same time simultaneously watching TV. You have to be switching back and forth, right? The last thing is what she calls sustained attention. So this is staying focused on something for a long time. And this is, if we are talking about meditation, this is certainly a big part of that, kind of relating to selective attention. So, and again, if you've studied this stuff in the past, I'm sure that you'll know more about it than I'm discussing tonight, and you might even have some, have some problems with the way that I'm explaining. But too bad, it's my talk, so everyone else shut up. The main function or mechanism, this is that thing that I was basically like playing around with in my head and trying to figure out, like, what is focus? It is essentially our ability to not be distracted. So rather than it being a habitual thought, like I kind of postulated, a habitual thought of asking, am I in the moment? That plays into it, of course. And that will come into play with meditation and with other activities, but really it is your ability to not get distracted. And what happens is we're trying to focus on a thing, and something else happens, and it's usually some kind of sensory input, and it will kind of shake us out of our focus on whatever we were focusing on, right? So she uses the example of something that is like very loud, You're sitting there meditating and everything is so nice. You're just still and calm and you're focusing on your breathing and you realize, like, this is just the best that I've ever felt in my entire life. Everything is so peaceful and wonderful, and I think I might be becoming enlightened right now. And then in the distance you hear BAM! And somebody, like, their car backfires, or somebody honks their horn or something, or like half the time of meditation during meditation in the dojo, a siren drives by and it's super loud. And that shakes us out of our focus by distracting us. And this is actually, if you think about it, a very useful thing from an evolutionary standpoint. We want to be able to recognize these loud noises, these dangerous things as they're happening, because if we just completely ignore dangerous things, then they kill us, right? So you hear a loud noise and you got to go like, what was that? Whether you're actually looking at it or not, you have some awareness of it, and you have that question of, like, what is that thing? And we don't want to completely get rid of that, because it's unlikely that you're going to find yourself in a place in life where you no longer have to ever worry about anything physically harming you. But you also don't want that to be completely in control of your mind and your consciousness when you are in a place that you know is safe. You're meditating alone at home, and off in the distance, this is what I'm getting at home lately, is my neighbor in COVID times has decided to start sleeping very late, and her alarm goes off at 11 o'clock in the morning, which I'm making fun of now, and only a few short years ago, that's when my alarm used to go off. But she's got like that super annoying, like, watch beep. So 11 o'clock, I'm just sitting there. Maybe I'm meditating, maybe I'm working on something when I'm sitting there, and the walls are paper thin. So it sounds like it's coming from inside my apartment. And it's just beep, beep, beep. And when that's happening, there is nothing else that you can focus on. That takes all of your attention. Now, there have been days where I start to wonder, has my neighbor died in her sleep because she is not turning off the alarm? It keeps going for minutes at a time. And those are the times where it is important to not be a slave to that part of your mind, to be able to not get distracted. So this is what the author of this argument, or this article talks about as a braking system. So this is a system that exists that we try to strengthen through our meditation and through our work on focus all the time in class. This is the thing that exists to prevent the wrong things from popping into your mind. So she says, scientists think this job is performed, and I'm about to get real sciencey here, and I don't understand half of this, but scientists think this job is performed by the ventrilateral prefrontal cortex, otherwise known as the VLP-FC, which is just behind each of your temples, and that blocks distractions. So some brains are better at using these brakes than others because the VLP-FC is delicate, and it uses a lot of energy. So this is a big part of what we're trying to do, apparently, when we meditate and we work on focus, is strengthening that ventrolateral prefrontal cortex, the VLP-FC. And it is, I think, almost completely useless to know that, to know the terms and what that part of your brain is called. But it's important to know that there is a mechanism there. And this is the mechanism that is focus. This is what allows us to not get distracted. This is what allows us to focus on what we want to focus on as deeply as we want to for as long as we want to, which is so important for meditation. This is not really that other side of it, which is what I was talking about or thinking about, which is a habitual thought that kind of brings us back to focus. So that's the other side of it. It would be really nice if we had such a strong kind of filter or braking system that our minds never wandered, or we never got those distractions, whether it's the beeping of a watch or whatever sounds or smells, or even the physical aches and pains that come up in our meditation. It would be really nice if none of that ever happened, because we had such a strong mechanism in place to stop those distractions. And that is part of what we try to do, and recognize that it is not perfect, right? As long as we are human beings, flesh and blood, and we're living in this state of duality, there are still going to be ups and downs with our meditation and our ability to focus. So we strengthen that, but also we want to be able to recognize as soon as we have wandered to come back to focus. So when I talk about this with the kids, Junior Wushu, our youngest kids, some of them in class are 5 years old, and I will tell you something about children. They don't have a very hefty ventrolateral prefrontal cortex. Their minds go, and I mean, it's like it takes nothing. And that's on a good day. We were out at the park yesterday, and we thought, let's try going to a different part of the park, because the ground's a little bit flatter, and maybe we have more shade, and it'll be nice. Let's try it out. So we go over there, and this is a place that we've never practiced before. And as soon as we sit into Seiza, and we start doing the bows and the creed and all that stuff, this other rambunctious crew of young gentlemen runs up, and these are like 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, and they are legitimately trying to kill each other, as far as I can tell. They're throwing each other hard on the ground. They're jumping up and like landing on each other. Half of them are not wearing masks, and they're extremely loud. This was distracting to me, and the kids in my class were, for the first good chunk of the class, not doing what they were supposed to be doing because it was so distracting. And that was a kind of obvious example, but it happens even in a great class because, you know, kids have not quite developed this ability yet. And when I first started teaching a junior wushu class, it was my first time trying to teach kids, and I was expecting them to be just like adults. So I'm like, okay, we're doing this, great, now we're doing this, we're moving on to this, and I'm like onto the third thing, and half the kids in class are still like in the lobby untying their shoes in their mind. They're thinking about what's for dinner, we're throwing front punches, and then they're 3 techniques ago throwing knee kicks, and it's like, where are they? It takes so little to shake that focus. And what we want to be able to do is keep it for as long as possible. So when I talk about focus with the kids, I talk about it like this. Your goal in class is to focus a little bit better for a little bit longer. And this is that same kind of mechanism of not allowing yourself to get distracted. So let's say, and this is what I talk about with kids, let's say that you can focus for 5 seconds. For you guys, let's say maybe you can focus for 10 seconds. But you can focus for an amount of time, and then your mind goes, right? A distraction comes up, or maybe your mind just kind of gets tired, and there is something to be said about this being like a limited resource, something that we have to strengthen, but in today's class at least, or in this meditation, it's kind of a finite resource, and you might only have so much. So fine, so it's 5 seconds, so you're trying to push it to 6 seconds. And after 6 seconds, your mind wanders, okay, and you come back, I'm focused now, and now I'm trying, for the rest of that class, I'm saying, I'm going to push it to 6 seconds, push it a little bit more. And then trying to just increase that time. And this is a very easy to understand way of thinking of focus. It's just literally, I'm here in the present, doing what I'm supposed to be doing, focusing on the thing that I'm trying to focus on for as long of a period of time as possible. That's focus, without getting distracted. And then the second part of that equation is like, as soon as you recognize, and with the kid, it's oftentimes I yell at them, I say, Johnny, switch your feet, front punch, not a knee kick, whatever it is. And they go, oh, and they realize that their brain was totally elsewhere, not on Kung Fu, and then they come back to it. So we would love to have that ability without some outside influence, without something having to kind of jog our attention back into place. And this is what we work on. This is what we are strengthening, that ability to do that in meditation. So I do believe that there is something at play that is like a habitual thought when we are sitting and meditating, at least, where we will recognize more quickly that our mind is out of focus and we're not thinking about what we're supposed to be thinking about. So we have the first part of the equation where we sit to meditate and we try to stay there as long as possible. We're focusing on the breath. This might last for one breath. This might last for the entire meditation. You're just there on the breath. And your mind is able to get so calm and peaceful that it's like there's nothing there. Right? So this is like that analogy that I'm stealing from Sifu Brown, who probably also stole it from somebody else, but you take a glass full of pond water, you scoop it up, you set it on the table, and in the beginning it's all swirlies, dirt, sea monkeys, whatever's in there swirling around, and then the longer it sits, the more all that swirly sediment settles down to the bottom. And it requires just sitting there is part of it. And that will help. That will allow the sediment to kind of settle down at the bottom. But being focused from the beginning will kind of, I'm not going to say pour gas on that. It's going to speed up that process. And if you sit still and you are immediately focusing on the breath, your mind is going to have a tendency to want to wander, but if you're able to keep it there for a good chunk of time, then all of that thought, all of that junk swirling around settles down pretty quickly. So that is what we're trying to do in the beginning of meditation. And it doesn't happen. Especially in your first couple of meditations, you might feel like it's happening to some degree, but as soon as you get more experience, you start to realize, like, my mind is all over the place. And that is the process of recognizing that your mind is a little bit more busy than you would like it to be. And this is a very important, very natural part of meditation practice. A lot of people have the experience of, like, I'm getting worse at meditation. It feels like I'm going backwards. That is usually actually just your realization of all of those swirling thoughts. And then we try to get that realization to happen as immediately and as often as possible. If my mind wanders 10 times in the meditation, I want that function, that mechanism to kick in 10 times and as quickly as possible. So that every time our mind wanders is basically like you take that glass of water, you shake it up and you put it back down, and then everything's swirling around, and so you got to bring it back down again. Every time you physically move, it has that effect to the largest degree. So try to sit still and try to keep your mind still, and that won't happen. But it happens. So your mind moves, your body moves, and then you come back and you try to get that to come back to calm as quickly and as solidly as possible. There's, if you guys haven't read this book yet, The Mind Illuminated, we have it in the dojo. It's a great book, one of the best books I've read on meditation. And he talks about this idea of kind of creating our own practice. It's like a mini practice within meditation where you recognize, I sat and my mind is too busy and my meditation sucks right now. And so then you go to something, my favorite thing to do is a breathing exercise. And you count the breaths, you count 5 to 10 breaths, and then you let that go, and then you're back with your meditation. And the author suggests that if you find that you have a particularly busy mind, that you want to have something like that is a mechanism, that is a practice, something that you do that allows you to come back to focus in a very strong way, which is different from what happens very often when we're meditating and we notice that our mind is wandering, and then we just say, we have a thought that sounds something like, oh, I'm thinking again, I'm so terrible at meditation. And then half the time your mind just goes off on some other tangent about thinking about how bad at meditation you are, rather than coming back to focusing on the breath or whatever it is that you're trying to focus on. So the suggestion here is we create something for ourselves where you are coming back to focus and you have a little bit more to focus on than just the breath. For example, in the case of doing a breathing exercise, I have the sensation of the breath and I have the counting, which is just enough for my mind to come back to being very strongly focused right here. And then, once I'm back to where I want to be, then I let go of the counting, I let go of trying to do anything with the breath, and just feel the breath. If that is strongly enough done, then your mind won't wander again, or won't wander again as quickly. You'll be able to stay there. So this is one way, one example of a way that we can better work on that back end of focus, right? We're always trying to strengthen the front part where we have that strong filtration system or brake system that doesn't let that beep, beep, beep gnaw into our brains and take us out of the moment. And when that happens, then we have the second part where we are able to come back to focus. So in meditation, we don't want this to be any more involved or long-lasting time-wise than necessary, because we want to get right back to being in the moment, focusing on the breath, and just being here now, right? Connected to the moment. And sometimes it is necessary to have that be somewhat substantial. Outside of meditation, it can be whatever it needs to be. And maybe you find that you're particularly distracted today, so what you're going to do is do a long breathing exercise where you're counting the breath. Maybe you do some Tai Chi. Maybe you just say, like, I'm going to do first loop, I'm going to go nice and slow and just allow myself to settle into this moment. And then when I set that thing aside, I set that practice aside, whatever it is, now I'm better able to be in the moment for a longer period of time. I've settled my mind. I have taken it out of the normal kind of distracted state where it's going to wander more quickly and easily, and put it back into this place where I want it. You know, your mind is like a child, or it's like a monkey. They call it the monkey mind in Buddhism and Zen. And we have to kind of take that, we'll call it a child, we have to take that child and put it back in its spot, right? And then it wanders over somewhere else, and then bring it back here, and you're gentle with it, right? If you are beating yourself up, that's like beating up your child, and you should not do that. Only I am allowed to beat up children because it's part of my job. All of you guys shouldn't. If you're being abusive to yourself, your mind is not gonna deal with that very well. Your mind is gonna be like, yeah, this does suck. Why am I even doing this? But if you are just gently bringing it back to the moment, then this is going to be a less jarring experience that will allow us to slide more easily back into that meditative state, or more easily back into the moment with whatever it is that we're doing in life. So let's practice that. Think of focus firstly as being that mechanism of filtering or breaking distractions, not allowing them to come in the first place, not bracing against it in a tense way, but in a very gentle way. I am completely enamored by, I am completely taken up by whatever that moment has for me right here. And I think to go at it, or to get at it from that state, being more like from a love for that moment, is going to be great. Then, when that fails, then you invite the thought in, and then you just let it go gently. Just let it come in one door and out the other, in one ear and out the other, and you gently just come back to the moment. So as we meditate tonight, let's work on this. Sit and be very much engaged in the moment with the breath, engaging that VLPFC, and when the thoughts come and when the distractions come, likely something from outside of yourself that is distracting you. It's your dogs or the sirens outside, or your stomach might be rumbling because when's dinner. Then practice the second and the back end of that, right? Let that thought go, come back to focus gently and consistently until it becomes second nature, so that you almost don't even recognize that it's happening. You are not distracted by the thing that's bringing you back from the distraction. Good luck. Sit comfortably.